Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru. We are studying the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Though the chapter is about meditation, still Sri Krishna is starting with some preparatory practices. He says meditation is an advanced practice. First, the mind must be prepared. Those who wish to scale the ladder of yoga, they must first purify themselves. So action is the means to begin with, and then meditation becomes the means later on. Means to what? Means to enlightenment, to God realization or self-realization. So first it is action. And action means all kinds of action. Not only our daily round of duties and activities in the world, but also worship, ritualistic action of all sorts. So all of that is preparatory, and it purifies and makes us ready for meditation. Now comes the 5th verse, is a famous verse, and justly so. It's very inspiring, very positive, and often quoted. The 5th verse. Uddhared ātmanātmānaṁ nātmānam avasādayet ātmaiva hyātmano bandhur ātmaiva ripur ātmanah. One should raise oneself through the self and never lower oneself, for the self alone is one's friend and the self alone is one's enemy. Basically, it's a call to self-effort. Raise yourself up by yourself. You are your own best friend. You are your own worst enemy. So that is a wonderful verse. And it points to one very, very central fact about spiritual life, that it's a choice. One must choose. One must be ready to make this effort. I remember this monk, Swami Ramananda Saraswati. He was referring to, so he was from a village, I think, and he said that in the village, all the farmers knew that when the newborn calves, which one will survive and which one will not survive, said if they would try to make the calf stand up, the farmers would make, the dairy farmers would make the calf stand on its own feet, and the calf, newborn calf, which struggled to stand on its own feet, you could help it. But there were some who might be weak or sick, and they wouldn't want to stand. And the farmers knew that these ones won't survive, they'll die. So it is, now it's a very interesting little anecdote, which or an example, which shows the combination of self-effort and God's grace. It's really, the farmer is much stronger than the calf, and it's the farmer who helps, but the calf must show its desire to stand. Similarly, we must show that we really want God, that we really want liberation, enlightenment, and then everything else is done by God. God will do it for us. And so God is the most liberal of everybody. If whatever we want, we get. That's putting it in devotional language. In more philosophical language, we are evolving spiritually. Whatever we are ready for at that stage, we get that. Whatever we are fit for or suited for. In the Mahabharata, it's a very instructive story which I love. People say that why did Krishna teach the Gita to Arjuna, who's the hero? Why not to the villain? It would have saved a lot of bloodshed and a lot of problems, the huge amount of suffering. If the wicked could be reformed, why teach spirituality to people who are already good? Well, Krishna tried. God does try. It's the problem is the wicked are not willing. So he went to Duryodhana and said, look, what you are doing is not right. This is not dharma. This is not ethical. You should give your cousins what they deserve, their portion of the kingdom, even a little bit. And Duryodhana refused. And he said something very perceptive. Duryodhana said that I know what is right and I know what is wrong, and you don't have to teach me that. That is not my problem. It's not that I don't know. I'm making mistakes out of ignorance. I know what I'm doing is wrong, but I can't stop myself from doing it. I know what one should do, what is ethical, but I don't feel like doing it. So he is pretty blunt and forward with it. Janami dharmam nachame pravritti. Janami adharmam nachame nivritti. Ridhi sthitena kenapi devena yatha niyojito asmi tatha karomyaham. So I know what is right, what is dharma. I have no desire to do it. I know what is wrong and unethical. I can't stop myself from doing it. And why not? Well, because there is this force within me. In my heart, there is this power which impels me on this path. And as I'm impelled, as I'm pushed along this path, I do what I'm forced to do. I mean, I'm sort of, he gives up. He says at no point does he say that, look, I'm in this trap. Can you help me out? Can you make me a better person? He has no question to ask Krishna. He has no, he's not willing. He feels this is the way it is, and that's it. And it's interesting, in the Bhagavad Gita, we will see later, Arjuna asks the same question. Arjuna asks the same question. Atakena prayuktoyam papam charati purusha anichannapi varshneya baladiva niyojita. Oh Krishna, impelled by what does a person do wrong things knowingly? Knowingly, exactly what Duryodhana said. Does a person do wrong things knowingly? As if forced, as if pushed by impelled by some force. Almost the same language as Duryodhana. But there's a difference. Arjuna wants to know, how can I overcome this? Please help me. I'm your student. Tell me what I can do to come out of this. Is there a way out of it? I want to be better. I want to be ethical and moral. I want to be a good person. I want to be a spiritual person. I want to be noble. Now, this willingness, so this is what Krishna is talking about here. This is the first step, the most crucial step towards spirituality. Upanishads, the mantra from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which we are discussing these days on Sundays, ātmanam ched vijaniyat ayam asmiti purushaha kimichan kasya kamaya shariram anusanjuret. If one were to know, this is what I am, this infinite existence, consciousness, bliss, if we were to realize that, then desiring what and for whose sake would one continue to suffer along with the body? A lot is packed into that verse, and we are unpacking it on successive Sundays. But today I just want to draw your attention to one word, the very first word, if. If one were to realize. That if comes in a number of times in the Upanishads. In the Kena Upanishad, iha ched avedit atha satyamasti na ched iha vedit mahati vinashti. In the Kena Upanishad it says, in this very life, if you realize your true nature, that you are the self, Brahman, then you are established in immortality. If one does not realize this, great is the loss. Mahati vinashti, great is the loss, the great is the destruction. You have lost a tremendous opportunity. The most valuable thing has been lost in life. So that again, that if entirely depends on our choice. I mean, at least we must make the effort. Ashtavakra, the highest non-dual teachings, he says, Yadi deham prithak kritya chiti vishramya tishtasi adunaiva sukhi shanto bandha mukto bhavishyasi. If, again that if you can see that you are not the body and rest and relax into consciousness itself, chiti vishramya means realize that you are pure consciousness. Adunaiva, right now, in this very condition, right now, right here, adunaiva, that he says, you will be free, sukhi shanto. You will be free of all suffering, you will attain fulfillment, and you will be free of bondage. Bandha mukto bhavishyasi. But again, if, so that if is crucial to beginning spiritual life. Otherwise, it doesn't begin. Nobody can do it for us. We must be willing. The Buddha, okay, so it's the Buddha Jayanti now. So the Buddha, the noble eightfold path, do you remember that the first one is samyak drishti? the um, the right view. But the second one is samyak sankalpa, right intention or right resolve. So the right view is, in a Buddhist perspective, that you understand the Four Noble Truths, that there is suffering and all of life is pervaded by suffering. And there is a cause of suffering, which is desire. And there is a solution to suffering, which is nirvana. And there is a way to do it. It's a system, a method, something to be done, which will take you to nirvana. So that's the right view. But the Buddha says, after getting the right view, one must then make up. It's your choice. You've got the right view. You've heard me out. Now make up your mind that I have heard this. I am convinced, and there is nirvana before me, enlightenment and freedom, and I choose to follow this path and search for enlightenment. This resolve has to be made. Until this resolve is made, the other parts of the path, the Eightfold path, the other 6 paths will not start. So this resolve has to be made. And it's my belief that the stress upon conversion in, for example, Christianity and Islam is basically this idea that one must make a choice for spiritual life. It's not so, what it became later on was converting people from other religions to your own religion. But if you look at it, everything in these religions is based on some kind of wisdom. So the original wisdom must have been to convert a person from worldly life into spiritual life, to awaken a person to the possibility of spiritual life, to the possibility of overcoming suffering. It's that same if. And here we are asked to make a decision. I had written down certain things about, yes. So, and somebody also mentioned it here. Does the choice come from our samskaras? Notice something, it's very interesting, that immediately when we talk about this, the first question that comes to our mind is, at least in the Vedanta group here, will be the free will question. So does it come from my samskaras? Am I programmed to make the choice? So if I don't make the choice, so those who don't make the choice, are they doomed? One thing is clear from this verse, that whether it is Krishna, Krishna clearly says for all practical purposes, he accepts free will. For all practical purposes. And every religion which says do this and do not do that, and every religion does that, do this and do not do that, they all assume free will. Without that, for practical purposes, there's no question of making any progress in spiritual life. Civilization itself is not possible. You see, law and consumer choice and our whole economy, none of it is possible without some kind of free will. So practically speaking, everybody assumes free will. I know of senior monks who would scold the younger monks who would read books and try to imitate the senior monks by saying Thakure Richa, it's the will of Sri Ramakrishna. And a senior monk, I remember, he would snap at us and don't say things which you don't mean. You don't understand it and you don't mean it. Say that you are doing it or you're not doing it. It's right now, one has to be up and doing. So ultimately, yes, it's a very deep metaphysical question, whether there is any free will or not. And I have told you on occasion about the Vedantic perspective that ultimately there is not. 3 levels of it, that from the practical level, it appears to us, yes, there is. It seems to be absolutely obvious. It has to be so. Then the second level, if you inquire into it, philosophically inquire into it, theologically inquire into it, and nowadays neuroscientifically, scientifically inquire into it, not just neuroscientifically, even in principles of science and causality, inquire into it, it seems free will is not possible. In a deterministic universe, in a neuroscientifically determined human consciousness, or theologically, every theistic religion says ultimately it's God's will, not your will. So it seems upon investigation at the second level, there is no free will. So there are theories which say there is no free will. There are theories which say there is free will. There are theories which try to combine the two. There are deterministic theories. There are libertarian theories. There are compatibilist theories. One beautiful article in this I've shared with many people earlier. Professor Arindam Chakravarti's article on free will. He puts it very, very elegantly. He says, "Why pray to a God who can hear the anklets on an ant's feet?" So he's quoting Sri Ramakrishna here. Sri Ramakrishna says, God hears everything. He can hear the sound of anklets on the feet of an ant. In India, little children, they put anklets with tinkle. You do something like that here in the United States. I've seen kids, they have these squeaky shoes. When they walk, it encourages them to walk. I think it makes squeaky sounds and flashes lights and all. So anklets. Now imagine anklets on the feet of an ant. How tiny they would be, the tiny feet of an ant. And so Sri Ramakrishna says, God can hear the sound of the anklets on the ant's feet. Now this philosopher, he asks, why pray to a God who can hear the sound of the anklets on an ant's feet? So that's how he asks. And the whole article is about free will, about what is free will, is there free will, what is the use of free will. So he says on the second level, it seems upon investigation, on the whole, there is no free will. And then he goes to the final level, the third level. From an Advaitic or Vedantic perspective, there is no free will, but there is freedom. Ultimately, there's freedom. As pure consciousness, as Satchidananda, you are free. You always were free at the deepest metaphysical level. And then what I like about that article is he brings it all together. What's the upshot? What's the final conclusion? The final conclusion is very, very, it often academicians are not bold enough to make such statements, but he makes a very beautiful, boldly he says this. He says, ultimately, this first stage, it appears to be that there is free will. Second stage, it appears that no, there is no free will. And the third stage, it appears again that there is freedom, if not free will. Then what do? Take this appearance of free will to acknowledge that ultimately there is no free will. It is all God's will. So use this appearance of free will, the best use of free will, or this so-called illusion of free will, whatever you call it. The best use of it is to acknowledge God, to continuously surrender to God. That much choice you have got. So I like that conclusion. I think Sri Ramakrishna would approve. And that answers his question. Why pray to a God who can hear the sound of anklets on an ant's feet? Because that's the best use of your free will. That's why you have got free will, to pray to God. So is this choice determined by our samskaras? We will see. Partly yes, partly no. It does not depend entirely on our samskaras. The second point I wanted to mention, so I've written down some points because there's so many things to say about this verse. The second thing I wanted to mention was uddhared, the Sanskrit uddhared. You can understand it in two senses, dhri and ri, ut, ri, and ut plus ri or ut plus dhri. The difference in the meanings would be, one is, ri means to snatch away, to take away. So when you have fallen in bad company, when you've fallen in the trap of the senses and of desires and the world, how can you snatch yourself away? You have to snatch yourself away from that. Like Duryodhana was not willing to do that. He just wanted to live in that depraved life. And Arjuna wanted to rescue himself from that. To rescue yourself from that, to snatch yourself away from the snare of the senses and of worldliness, that is one meaning of uddhared. The second meaning is uddhri, means to raise yourself up. So from meanness to something noble, to something higher. There is a saying that inferior people discuss other people. People of average quality, they discuss events, and superior people discuss ideas. So gossiping about other people, that's inferior. And if you neutrally discuss the pros and cons of some actual event, all right, that's better. But to think about and discuss these subtle underlying concepts, in whatever subject you're discussing, that's a superior thing to do. So that is raising yourself higher. remember that one of the mantras we chanted in the ceremony to become monks. So one of the things we said was, Brihad Vadema, henceforth, let us talk only about the noble, the vast, and the great. What a beautiful idea. Let us no longer think or talk about, dwell upon mean things, worldliness, little things, miserable things. Let's only talk about the great. Let's only talk about noble things and high things. Brihad Vadema literally means talk about the vast. This lifting yourself, lift yourself from the realm of the senses to the realm of the heart, and to the realm of the mind, and to the realm of the intellect, and finally to the realm of the spirit. So from lower to higher, this is lifting yourself higher. Snatch yourself away from the bad company of anger and passion and greed. When he says ātmanāh, ātmanāh, lift yourself up by yourself. So what self are they talking about? Uddhared ātmanātmānaṁ. So lift yourself up by yourself. What is that by yourself? What self? It can't be the pure consciousness. So here all of it is meant. It is meant body and senses and mind and intellect, and ultimately the Atman also. What does it mean? The word Atma in the Upanishads is used, or in the Vedas also, is used for all of them. Atma just means self. So, for example, we have studied the method of the 5 sheets of the human personality: the physical and the vital and the mental and the intellectual and the causal, or the bliss sheet. The annamaya, pranamaya, manomaya, vijnanamaya, anandamaya. These are the levels of our personality. And the way we study it in Vedanta is to call them sheaths, kosha. The idea being the real self, existence, consciousness, bliss, is sort of like a nesting doll. The Russian nesting dolls are there. The smaller, you open the doll, there's a smaller doll inside. Open that, there's another little doll inside. So somehow the idea is given to our minds that we are some kind of, consciousness, existence, consciousness, bliss, and hidden by 5 levels of 5 sheets. It's a later development. If you go to the source, to the Upanishad itself, Taittiriya Upanishad, where this is talked about in the Brahmananda Valli, 2nd chapter of the Taittiriya Upanishad, it does not say sheets. The word kosha comes nowhere. The Upanishad says annamaya atma, the self made of food; pranamaya atma, the self made of vitality; manomaya atma, the mental self, the intellectual self. At every level, they're talking about a self, a jiva, purusha, physical, vital, mental, intellectual. So at every level, you use that to lift yourself up. The body. The Lord has given us these fingers, so why not use it for japa? Keep count of the japa. Has given us the tongue to take the name of the Lord, and has given us breath. You can do pranayama with it. you can or keep track of your mantra with the ingoing and outgoing of the breath. Has given us a mind to think about God, a heart to love God, an intellect to do vichara, inquiry into who am I. Engage all of these at different levels. So Atmana means by oneself. Which self? Yes, physical self. You must be bold enough to say even at the physical level also it's a self. We feel right now, a physical body, I am this. Very good. The Upanishad says there's nothing wrong in that. You can what will you use the body for? What will you use the prana, the physiological energies flowing through us? What will you use the thoughts? So many thoughts are continuously happening throughout the day. Now, I want to address what Prabir Babu brought up, the samskaras. See, what is the role of our previous conditioning? It is this. The idea is that if we do not make an effort, what will happen? Do not make an effort, what will happen? If we do not make an effort, whatever is packed in our samskaras and whatever is evoked at that moment, that will pop up. There's something called a default setting, like in a computer, in old computers, they used to boot. And whatever was in the default setting, it would come up like that, unless you interrupted it. So the way we have been set, what has been packed in us over lifetimes, that's coming out by default. And you you interrupt it at the physical level, at the mental level, at the emotional level, and introduce something positive. You take a decision. You have the power of deciding, what will I do? What will I say? What will I think? Kai manavakya. What will I do at the physical level? What will I say at the verbal level? What will I think at the mental level? And we have this choice. This is the window of free will. You may call it ultimately from a metaphysical level an illusion, but practically for us, it's there. It's a tiny vanishing window. The idea is that these samskaras, our conditionings, they bubble up. See, I have a desire suddenly. But suddenly means what? Where did it come from? Just because we are not aware, we are not cautious, it suddenly come up and taken over my mind. Now I must have that cookie. So where did that come up from? It came up from in the conditioning, and it's been developing over a few seconds. At least it's bubbled up from the depths of my unconscious. I did not notice it. At that time it was weak, and you could have, without it, it has not yet summoned up our psychic energies and forced you to fulfill those desires. So it was bubbling up. At that point, you could have replaced it with a positive thing. No, I will not do that. I will do this. No, I will not say that. I will say this. I will not think that thought. I will think these thoughts. I could have replaced it. I could have replaced the mantra and any negative thing with the mantra. I'll repeat the mantra in my mind. But if I miss that little opportunity, that little window, and it's a small window, and there have been very interesting neuroscientific studies. I remember a scientist from India's leading neuroscience institute, NIMHANS. So he was giving a presentation about the effects of meditation on decision making. So he says that we tend to normally react in a knee-jerk fashion, in an instinctive fashion to whatever we have been programmed with, whatever the impulse is coming from outside, we react immediately to it. What meditation does is, it slows down that reaction so that there's a chance for some conscious thinking and consciously, deliberately doing something, which is a beautiful thing. I mean, he actually showed data that long-term meditators, you can see the difference in the neuronal firings. That certain the prefrontal cortex that is more active or something like that he was showing. But the upshot was that there is a window of opportunity. And if we are alert, especially meditators, he'll teach meditation, the 6th chapter now. If you're alert enough, you can catch that window of opportunity and substitute the negative reactions coming out. You say, why does it have to be negative? We have all kinds of samskaras. Yes, but mostly, what kind of samskaras do we have? What we have gathered over many lifetimes. There's a very beautiful term used by Sridhar Swami. Prachina karma samskara. Prachina means very ancient. Very ancient means many, many lifetimes. And if we are, what kind of samskaras we have, a very good way of seeing is what kind of, what is the situation we are in right now. If the situation is not very bright, then we understand what kind of samskaras we have gathered over many lifetimes. If it was very saintly, we would be enlightened people. We would be jivan muktas or something like that. But if I am not, then it means my samskaras are at best a mixed bundle. One Swami put it this way: you have to make an effort. Hair grows by itself. Then you have to cut it and clean it and comb it. That much effort you have to do to take care of it. Growing by itself is automatic. I remember this nice story about the French Revolution. So at that time, they were very much against the Catholic Church, and the revolutionaries were overthrowing all kinds of religion. So There was this man who was a priest in a small church, and he had a friend who was a revolutionary. So the friend was visiting with his friend, the priest, and he saw the priest was teaching his little son the Bible. And the revolutionary was completely against it. He told his friend, "Why are you brainwashing him? You should not, you should let him grow freely." And the priest said, "What should I do?" "Let him grow freely. And then when he grows up, he will choose for himself whether he should um, have a religion or have no religion." The priest did not say anything. It so happened that the priest also had a beautiful garden, a beautiful flower garden, small garden. So the revolutionary one day once again came to see his friend, the priest, few weeks later. And then he saw the garden was devastated. There was no garden. It's just overrun with weeds. And he went to his friend, "My God, what happened to your beautiful cultivated garden?" He said, "No, I took your advice. I just let it grow freely." It grows freely, what will grow? The weeds will grow. They'll choke out everything else. So for a long time, it's not that this is endlessly so. There will come a time. There will come a time when the mind will be sufficiently pure, when we have good samskaras, automatically our samskaras will come out, positive samskaras will come out, godly samskaras will come out. Then you don't have to make the effort of replacing it and struggling all the time with it. Sri Ramakrishna says, "Have you not seen the boatmen in the Ganga? When they launch their boats into the river, how mightily they row. They use a long bamboo pole. Even now, those little boats are there. So they will push against the river bottom and against the bank to push their little boat out into the river. And they row hard and they sweat. It's a hard struggle. But once they are in midstream, in the current, and Sri Ramakrishna gives he must have seen this all the time on the bank of the Ganga. And he says, "So have you not seen how they sit on the boat? They just hold the rudder and they smoke the hubble bubble with the other hand. So they are relaxed, and the boat sails along merrily because they're caught by the current of the river. They are in midstream now." Similarly, at the beginning of spiritual life, one has to struggle without much result. One has to struggle and against one's contrary tendencies. Once a little bit of purity has come, then it becomes much easier. That is what Sri Krishna says here. Aruruksho muner yogam karma karanam uchyate. Those who are climbing the ladder of yoga, for them action is the way. That means all sorts of spiritual practices. And those who have achieved purity of mind, yoga rudasya tasyeva shamah karanam uchyate. Those who have achieved purity of mind, the result of karma yoga, for them meditation is the way. So meditation is a later practice. Already some amount of purity of mind has been achieved. There's a beautiful Zen story about a meditator who was told by his master to meditate. And he was very troubled by bad thoughts. So he was restless. So he told his master. Master said, "Do this." In Japanese gardens, they have these smooth pebbles. So he said, have 2 bowls in front of you. And every time, like a negative thought, a bad thought comes in your mind, put one bowl, put a black pebble in the bowl. And a positive thought, something related to your spirituality comes to your mind, then put a white pebble in there. And like this, watch your mind. So he sat. In the first few days, the bowl was mostly black with a few white pebbles in between. But over the months, the number of black pebbles diminished and the number of white pebbles increased. In the Yoga Sutras, the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, there is a commentary by Vyasa on the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. I think the first sutra, there is this explanation. Evam vritti samskara chakram avartamanam aharnisham avartamanam. This cycle of vrittis and samskaras is revolving day and night. What does that mean? Samskaras means our conditionings. Whatever we are, the the sum total of which determines our personality. Remember, there's a difference between personality and the real self. The real self for all of us is Satchidananda. We are all pure consciousness. But the individual personality, which is the mind, which is our personhood, the little person, that's also important because that's the lens through which we are interacting with the world. So that personality is composed of samskaras, conditionings, has a lot of conditioning from past lives. That's why we are all different. Now he says, these conditionings, these samskaras, they bubble up once in a while. Thoughts, images, and especially desires, likes and dislikes, especially they come up, when they come up in the mind, they are called vritti, a ripple on the surface of the mind. And these vrittis, they manifest as raga dvesha, likes and dislikes. Sometimes because of something we experience from the world, or even when we're not experiencing anything in the world, sitting quietly, it will come from inside us. So these are our samskaras. And it's good, it's interesting exercise to watch. Not particularly very interesting at the end of it. It's after some time it's boring. It's repetition of the same patterns. We realize that we're not very exalted beings after all. Just a bundle of the same kind. I think most people have some combination of the same kind of samskaras. I was reading Swami Brahmananda. He asked Sri Ramakrishna, how do you see who is sattvic and who is tamasic and rajasic? And Sri Ramakrishna said, just like you can see your face in the mirror, I can see the contents of a person's mind when I look at them. And Swami Brahmananda said, would you teach me that? And Sri Ramakrishna, as usually said, if it's the mother's will, it will happen. In a few days' time, it happened to him. And he could see. And very soon he saw the danger of it. He said that I'm just seeing the garbage in people's minds. I'm just looking at them and seeing through them into the garbage in their minds. And that's how it's entering into me. And then he went to Sri Ramakrishna and said, take this back, I don't want it. Now, that's our bundle of samskaras, and it is coming up as vrittis. And whatever vrittis we entertain on the surface of our mind consciously, especially repeatedly, that goes back and strengthens certain samskaras. Now, what we are being told is, as the samskaras are coming up, bubbling up as vrittis, before they become too strong, before it comes to the stage where Duryodhana says, I can't do anything. It's too late. I'm just forced to do something by the forces within me. Before it becomes like that, you replace the vrittis with positive vrittis. You say, no, I will not think in this way. I will not say such harsh words. I will not do this wrong thing. And when we make this decision and successfully make a change and entertain a positive vritti on the surface of our minds and at a conscious level, that entertained vritti will go back into the subconscious. And thereby slowly the black pebbles will become a little more, it will be replaced. It will start, the composition will start changing. That is called purification of the mind. It's a slow process. As Atman, you're perfect. The changing of the mind, it's a slow, hard, and unglamorous process. So this is called rescue yourself by yourself. Now, nātmānam avasādayet. Yes, avasadana. Avasadana is in fact this word for depression. So do not lower yourself. This is the negative side of it. Positive side was raise yourself up by yourself, rescue yourself by yourself. And you have to do it. Nobody else can do it. There must be a self-effort to it. And do not lower yourself. I remember my own little experience in the monastery once. So I was supposed to be sent to the United States. My duties were changed. Earlier I was teaching the novices, the new monks. So the new batch of monks was coming in, and the Swami in charge of our training center said to me, I wonder if you will teach this session. I don't know whether to put you in the schedule or not, the timetable, the routine for the classes. And I don't dare ask the general secretary. He might think it's too small a matter. I said, all right, I'll go and ask. So I went to the general secretary, Swami, at that time. And I asked, so this is it's a very funny little anecdote. The language I used was, will I, or should I teach this time, this session? Should I teach? And his answer was, should you eat? In Bengali, I said, Ami parabo ki? Then his answer was to me was, Tui khabi ki? You see, the point is, you never ask whether I'm going to eat or not. Why are you asking whether I'm going to work or not? Of course you're going to work. As long as you're in an ashram and in the ashram of Sri Ramakrishna, you're going to work for Sri Ramakrishna. So that is, I mean, this is the explanation. But his answer was just two little words. I said, do I teach? Or will I teach? And his answer was, will you eat? If you say if you're going to eat, you're going to work. Now, our tendency is, when we have something positive to do, we have to make an effort to do it. Things like eating and sleeping and pleasure seeking, that we never question. It comes automatically to us. But spiritual practices do not come automatically to us. You have to do it consciously. Like that rose garden being overcome by the weeds. I let it grow naturally. So if I live naturally, what will happen is all the programming within me, that will bubble up, and I'll never get anywhere. I'll never get anywhere. This dependence, see, sometimes the mind says, oh, it's all God's will. If I will pray, if I will meditate, it depends on the will of the Lord. We never say that. That was the Swami's what fault he pointed out to me. You never say that about eating. It's God's will whether the food will come or not. No, you happily turn up when the dining hall bell is rung. You are there with your bowl and sitting there waiting for the goodies to come. Whereas when it comes to meditation and study and work and service, why do you ask, should I do it? So this is, yeah. Nātmānam avasādayet. Do not lower yourself. So unconsciously we lower ourselves. One Swami put it very beautifully. How do we lower ourselves? At the deepest level, from an Advaitic perspective, we lower ourselves from the perspective of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. From the perspective of Sat, pure being, you are infinite existence. The moment you throw yourself into a fractured reality, I am this much and not the rest, you have lowered yourself. This is called avasadana. This is the deepest interpretation of avasadana. Instead of saying that I am unlimited existence, I am only the existence of this body. This body. Only this person and not anything else. Swami Virajanandaji, who was the president of our order, he says that the entire universe, when I experience the entire universe along with this body and this mind is presented to me together. Either I am all of it or none of it. Both will set you free. I am none of it. Jagat mithya. I am the witness consciousness in which this movie is playing. Or I am all of it. Brahman alone is this entire universe. ātmaiva idam sarvam. The Atman alone is everything here. Ishāvasyam idam sarvam. See the Lord spread around, cover everything with the Lord. Yes, both ways it will work. But what do? We make a boundary. Inside this skin, I am. Everything outside this skin, other. I am this one, this body only, little thing. This is avasadana, depressing oneself, lowering oneself. Of course, at a very metaphysical level, this is being said. Lowering oneself to the level of the body. A tiny fraction of existence I am instead of all existence. Then from the perspective of chit, consciousness, I've thrown all my understanding into objects. I have completely missed out that I am the... So what is consciousness is hidden from me, and the jada, the insentient world becomes my entire object of attention. That is lowering yourself from the perspective of your infinite consciousness. And dukkha, most interestingly, suffering, unhappiness. You are not allowed to be unhappy. Every time you are unhappy, for whatever reason, Swami said, I don't care. For whatever reason you're unhappy, you're committing an offense against your true nature. Your nature as Ananda, you are committing an offense against it by saying, I am unhappy. You have some deadly mistake, fatal error has been committed, which is why you think you're unhappy. Why? They're all connected. The moment I limit my existence to one little body, the moment I limit my existence to one little body, the moment I throw all my awareness on the world outside and not on the consciousness, the result of it will be I'll be unhappy. Dukkha is the result of that. So avasadana, lowering oneself at the level of sat, at the level of chit, and at the level of ananda. What a beautiful idea. Of course, in a much more practical sense, avasadana means doing the opposite of the 4 yogas. So all sorts of selfishness, which is the opposite of karma yoga, that is lowering oneself. All sorts of the 100, the 1,000 desires we run after in the world instead of desiring or loving God, that is lowering oneself. The distraction in the mind, that means continuously flickering mind instead of focus and concentration, that is lowering ourselves. And not knowing ourselves as Satchidananda and knowing ourselves as body-mind, that is lowering ourselves. So lowering ourselves from the perspective of karma yoga, being selfish, not unselfish. Lowering ourselves from the perspective of bhakti yoga, desiring 1,000 things in the world and not loving the one God. Lowering ourselves from the perspective of Raja Yoga or Dhyana Yoga, which is the subject of this chapter, is being scattered, not focused. I was reading this beautiful book. It was in our syllabus in last year at the Divinity School, Waiting for God. What's her name? The French. Does anybody remember the great French
Waiting for Godot?
What was that?
Are you thinking of a play called Waiting for Godot?
No, this is Waiting for God.
Oh, I don't know.
The French philosopher who died very young. I always forget her name. Simone Weil. So Simone Weil. So she says she was a very intense young French woman just before the Second World War. She was Jewish, but very inspired by Christianity, by spirituality, deeply spiritual person, and yet she could not belong to any particular organized religion. So she had this problem. So that book is a classic. Now, why I'm saying that is that one chapter is something worth reading by all students. She says the importance of studies. Just she means by that school and college studies, importance of studying. And you'll be surprised to know what she says by there. She says, what is the importance of studying seriously and sincerely? She says the real purpose of study is to develop the power of concentration so that one can concentrate on God. This is the value of school studies, she says. The value of school studies is, she says, concentration is spirituality. Distraction is a sin, she says. What she would say to our modern age, I don't know. You're continuously distracted. She would consider it a most sinful stage. So it is an offense against Raja Yoga to be distracted. And finally, from the perspective of Jnana Yoga, it is avasadana, lowering oneself, if one does not identify with Brahman, our real nature, and identifies with body and mind. This is avasadana. Literally, the word avasadana means depression. Avasad in Bengali and Hindi, it means depression, a kind of pathological depression. It seems Simone Weil and Simone de Beauvoir, the French existentialist, who was partners with Sartre. So they were classmates, or at least in the same school together. And they did not get along well at all. They had a quarrel. Yes, somebody's given the link. Nātmānam avasādayet. Is there anything else that I wanted to say? All right. And what is the way? How do you lift yourself? And how do you not lower yourself? The way is, we know what was said in the earlier verses: karma yoga, bhakti yoga, raja yoga, and ultimately jnana yoga. What is the way to lift ourselves in a spiritual sense? In a more modern secular sense, you would say, positive thinking, don't do negative, don't indulge in negative thinking, be up and doing, things like that. But here, very clearly, what is meant is engage yourself in the spiritual quest. Instead of selfish activities, karma yoga. Instead of desiring the world, love God. Instead of distracting yourself, focus on the real self or on God, whatever your path is. So the three preliminary yogas, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, raja yoga, would be the ways in which one lifts oneself. One does not diminish or lower oneself. Now let me read the second one. The second verse after that, sixth verse, says the same thing in positive language. Number 6. Bandhur ātmanātmanas tasya yenātmaivātmanā jitaḥ anātmanas tu śhatrutve vartetātmaiva śhatru-vat. To him who has conquered the self, body and senses by his self, the self indeed is his friend. For the uncontrolled man, however, the self alone is adverse, like an enemy. Yes. Control of the body, control of the senses, control of the mind and the emotions, and knowledge at the level of the intellect. This is a sign of a self. Here, by self, you mean the entire body, mind, personality, which is your friend. Friend in what sense? In your spiritual journey. Uncontrolled, unpurified. Like Kathopanishad says, the chariot where the horses are not disciplined, where the charioteer is drunk, and so you're going to end up in a crash. So in the same way, here the uncontrolled senses, uncontrolled mind is your enemy. That self is your enemy. Which self is your friend? Which self is your own greatest friend? If the spiritual practices are being done, you're helping yourself. You're your own greatest enemy if you do not do the spiritual practices and be like, Duryodhana, what can I do? Whatever I feel like, I'm just doing that. It won't work. Just things will get worse and worse. Let me see. I'll just introduce a concept here. Since we have a little bit of time, I don't want to start the next verse. It's a deep and beautiful concept, and I just wanted to say that self here, it refers to 4 things. One is the waking self, the dreaming self, the deep sleep self, and the real self, the 4th, Turiya, the pure consciousness. So what do you do at each level? And this is a very nice insight into spiritual life. At the level of the waking self, the physical universe, you are one consciousness in all bodies. Bodies are many. Minds are also many. But the consciousness behind all bodies and minds is one consciousness. This is called Vishwatma, the one self of the entire universe. So the limited self, you expand yourself to say, I am not just here in service of this one little body. Let my life be for the benefit of all. At least this attitude should be there. Let my life be for the benefit of all, my actions be for the benefit of all. What will I do? What will I say? What will I think? Which will be in service of this world self, all beings. And then the dreaming self, he says, that is at the subtle level. At the subtle level, he says, this is at the level of love or belonging to the cosmic mind. Your oneness between the Taijasa and the Hiranyagarbha. The first level is oneness between you, the individual Vishwa, and the Virat. At the You have to remember your Mandukya paradigm. At the level of the subtle body, the dream self, the oneness between the Taijasi and the Hiranyagarbha. This oneness between Taijasi and Hiranyagarbha is Bhakti Yoga. The oneness between the Vishwa and Virat is Karma Yoga. You see how it comes together. How do you do it physically? The oneness with the universe physically. By directing all your actions for the welfare of others, family, community, organization, nation, world, all beings without any limit, no boundary, no differentiation based on race and religion and gender. No, all beings I serve because I am one with all. To hate somebody, to like this person and dislike the other person, actually it's a deep error. I don't understand that I am the one reality in all beings. So to make yourself one with the one self of the universe, of the world. That's at the physical level. How will you express it? Karma Yoga. Mentally, inside the Taijasa and the Hiranyagarbha, the individual and the cosmic, I am one with that cosmic. How do you express it? Through love. So mentally, towards all beings, I have this feeling of overwhelming love, of being one with them. At the level of my mind. Physically, service. At the level of my mind, love. This is Bhakti Yoga. And then the insight goes on further. At the causal level, where our experience is what? Deep sleep. And the cosmic experience is Ishvara, God. So at that causal level, not deep sleep, but Samadhi. Being absorbed in that Savikalpa Samadhi, oneness with my Ishta Devata, with my chosen ideal, oneness with God in Samadhi. That is Yoga, Raja Yoga, the ideal of Raja Yoga. So at the physical level, Karma Yoga, at the subtle level, Bhakti Yoga, and at the causal level, Samadhi or Raja Yoga. So you're saving the best for the last? The Advaita, the Jnana Yoga? Yes, because this is all perspective from Jnana Yoga anyway. So the Jnana Yoga perspective is the knowledge that I am the Turiya. In reality, I am that one consciousness appearing in these three ways. Which are three ways? Physical, subtle, and causal. Sthula, Sukshma, Karana. Sthula level, Karma Yoga. Sukshma level, Bhakti Yoga. Karana level, Samadhi or Raja Yoga. It's one way of looking at it. Just an insight sharing. And the knowledge is that I am one with all. Swami Vivekananda, when you see what is the best ideal, he says, notice how he puts it. Let all vision cease, or if you cannot, dream but truer dreams, which are eternal love and service free. You see, let all vision cease. That means become established in the truth that you are Brahman. Finished. The game is over for you. Or if you cannot, if it's not possible yet, what's the next best alternative? What's the best philosophy of life? What should be the ideal in life? He says eternal love and service free. Eternal love, Bhakti Yoga. Service free, Karma Yoga. Hanuman, when Ramchandra asked him, what do you think of me? And he said, at the level of the body, you are my master, I'm your servant. In the Hanuman Chalisa, which many people recite devoutly, not only in India, I saw in the United States, there are groups which are Hanuman worshippers, New Mexico and other places. I think it's because of Neem Karoli Baba. So in Hanuman Chalisa, Hanuman is described as being Rama kaj karibe ko atura, most eager to do the work of the Lord. So as long as we have a physical body, it should be used, we should dedicate it to the work of the Lord. In service, repeat the name of God, do in whatever way, engage ourselves in the work of Ishvara. There's a physical level. And at the mental level, he says, you are the whole and I'm your part. I'm amsha, twadangsha. This is that the equation between Taijasa and Hiranyagarbha, part of the whole, the bhakti level. And then he says that from the perspective of the self, he says, Tvamevaham, Deha buddhya, jiva buddhya, atma buddhya. Deha buddhya means from the physical level, you are the master, I am the servant. Jiva buddhya, as a sentient being, you are God and I am thy part. And we have a relationship of part and whole, devotion. And atma buddhya, as ultimately as the self, as pure consciousness. You and I are the same. Tvameva aham. That is, of course, the Turiya. Yeah. So I just wanted to share that. All right. There's a link here. Yes, Waiting for God, Simone Weil. It's pronounced Simone Weil. Rick says, I can understand how the self could be an enemy. But how can the self be an enemy? No, the self cannot be an enemy. The self cannot be your friend also. You are it. So here, that's why I said, what is meant by self here? The ātmanāh, by the self. How can the self be an instrument in anything? So what self is meant here? Physical self is meant here. The sensory self is meant here. The mental and emotional self is meant here. The moral self is meant here. That's why I was referring to the Taittiriya Upanishad, where what we now dismiss as sheaths, it's a later post-Shankara development. Physical sheath, vital sheath, mental sheath, intellectual sheath, and somehow like a nesting doll somewhere inside the Atman is there. The original text does not bear that out. The original text in the Upanishad considers all of these as selves: physical self, vital self, mental self, sensory self, emotional self, intellectual self. And those selves can be our friend and our enemy on our path to enlightenment. Nothing helps us as much as ourselves, and nothing really harms us. Nothing can harm us more than we harm ourselves. Shashank says, our scriptures repeatedly call 6 enemies. Yes, Shad-ripu. What is the relationship of these to fear, and what is the root of fear? Is fear a byproduct of one of the other qualities? Is fundamental. Swami Vivekananda said strength. Strength is what the Upanishad speak to me from every page. Correct. So fear is fundamental. From an Advaitic perspective, dvitiyad vai bhayam bhavati. The Upanishads again and again say, yasya udaram pashyati tasya bhayam bhavati. Whoever sees another, whoever sees difference, for that one there is fear. So fear is fundamental. Fear, anxiety is fundamental. And that comes from seeing a second. Seeing a second means you see a second, but you don't consider the second to be a second. You consider all of them to be one reality. If we do not see that, you feel that I am cut off from others, a fractured reality, then there is fear. Moment we are in the dualistic vision, we are in fear. I am separate from everybody else. Fear. Notice how at every level we are told, at the physical level, make yourself one with the world soul, that everything is now not just for this one body, for the welfare of everybody. At the mental level, one with God through devotion. And at the causal level, one with God through meditation, samadhi. So all of these, this all shows the oneness. Actually, oneness exists only in the reality, in Turiya, where you are already that. Swami Bhuteshananji he said in one place, very clearly he made this point. Brahma darshan hoy na, Brahma gyan hoy. So darshana means having a mystical experience. You do not have a mystical experience of the highest reality. You have knowledge of the highest reality. The knowledge is, I am that. That cannot be experienced as an object because you are it. On that very high metaphysical note, let us end today. We'll meet tomorrow for Mataji's talk. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.